Hello everyone, I'm Kevin Fandel, and today we're going to talk about contracts. Let's get started. Intent means that both parties to the contract, the offeror and the offeree, intend to be bound by the promises that they make. To determine intent, we judge it by the reasonable objective person standard. This means we will ask a neutral party, such as a member of the jury, to determine how they would view the offer and the intent made by the offeror if they were in the shoes of the offeree. That way, we avoid the biased opinion of the offeror, who has a vested stake in the outcome of any dispute. Where intent becomes potentially problematic is with respect to advertisements. Typical advertisements are what we call invitations to negotiate. This means that an advertiser, such as a business, is not actually making an offer to the parties, but rather inviting the parties to come in and negotiate a potential offer. And because that offer is usually not specific enough to carry out all of the details of a valid contract, we don't bind the party making the offer. There is one exception to that rule, and that is where the offer is specific enough and has enough detail such that there is nothing left to negotiate. These offers are typically very specific, such as somebody selling a single used car, or in the case of internet offers, it could be a click here to buy now offer, where there is no option for negotiation. Let's think about a few examples of what might be and might not be a valid offer. The first one on your screen says, "I'm considering selling my car to you for $1,200. Is that a valid offer if you were to accept?" Generally, we would say no. Since the offeror is only considering, they're not actually committing, and therefore they lack intent to be bound by the terms of their promise. What about the next one? "I will sell you my car for $1,200. This sounds more likely to be an offer because if you accepted, the other party would be bound to go through with the deal. The third one on the screen, "Would it be a good deal if I sold you my car for $1,200? does not seem like an offer at all. It seems more like an invitation to negotiate, much like an advertisement. But what about the last one? "You wouldn't consider paying $1,200 for my car, would you?" In that case, what would happen if the other party said, "Yes, I would"? That was precisely the question in our first case for this lecture, Lucy v. Ziemer. In Lucy v. Ziemer, two parties, Mr. Ziemer and Mr. Lucy, were negotiating over the sale of a piece of land owned by Mr. Ziemer. Mr. Ziemer did not appear to have the intent to sell the land to Mr. Lucy, but Mr. Lucy continued to insist, offering a variety of prices for the land. Finally, Mr. Lucy asked Mr. Ziemer, "You wouldn't consider taking $50,000 for the land, would you?" To which Mr. Ziemer agreed and asked Lucy to write down the terms on a bill that the waitress was carrying with her. Here's a copy of that bill, and it's a little bit hard to read, so I've typed it out for you. It says, "We hereby agree to sell to W.O. Lucy the Ferguson farm, complete, for $50,000, title satisfactory to buyer." And the note is signed by both Mr. and Mrs. Ziemer, who jointly owned the property. A few days later, when Mr. Lucy appeared at the residence of Mr. Ziemer with the equivalent of $50,000, Mr. Ziemer refused to sell the land. And the question in this case, when Mr. Lucy sued, was whether Mr. Ziemer had intent to be bound. Again, here we look at the reasonable objective person standard, and we ask what somebody who heard the words, of Mr. Lucy and Mr. Zemer would have believed. Here, the jury found that a reasonable person would have believed that they intended to be bound by the promises made. Mr. Lucy successfully bought the farm. Let's take a look at a more recent case involving an advertisement. The advertisement was made by Pepsi, and our plaintiff saw that advertisement and believed that Pepsi was making a valid offer. Now again, advertisements can be valid offers if they are specific enough, but most times they are not. You be the judge. Let's take a look at the commercial.
Introducing the new Pepsi Stuff Catalog. Now, the more Pepsi you drink, the more great stuff you're going to get.
Sure beats the bus.
As you probably surmised, Leonard was interested in getting the Harrier jet fighter by collecting Pepsi points. And as you hopefully also surmised, this would not have been considered a valid offer. The judge found that advertisements are generally invitations to deal, and in this case, it was nothing more than a humorous attempt to draw in additional customers. Thank you for your attention and for your interest in studying contracts with me.